and welcome to our latest episode of this podcast. We have a new co-host, Curtis Warren, who's all the way in New Mexico. What's up, Curtis?
A beautiful, clear day in New Mexico.
Yes.
So
Oh, jealous, jealous.
That's right. It's still 6 o'clock over there, isn't it?
it is. It's 6:19. The Royals have just started to hopefully win. We'll see. So pretty nice day outside. Really enjoying it.
Um,
So
Absolutely. What prompted this was realizing we have all of us have different work schedules, and the thought kept kicking around in the head, going, we need at least a few more people in order to round out the podcast and to keep everything flowing, because Stephen Kelly, Shaggy, myself, we all have different schedules.
right.
And Shaggy and I, we happen to have today off. Stephen works, he's a manager, salaried manager where he's at now, so different work schedules and everything else, so we haven't always been able to record an episode when we needed to. So I got to thinking, and that's when I remembered Curtis. He actually used to live here in Holden, so it's something we have in common. And plus,
Yeah. I escaped.
he escaped Holden. Some may argue I escaped Warrensburg, but I'm not so sure about that. But anyway, Curtis, tell people about yourself, the things that you were into growing up, that sort of stuff.
Well, I'm currently a student at New Mexico Tech, and it's a small engineering and science school. I'm going to graduate next December, so it only took me about 7 years to get a bachelor's degree, which is not. I grew up in Holden, which is a pretty small community. My dad went to school for the first time, went to college for the first time the year I was born, and my mom was a nurse. She had been to college before. So when I was growing up, my dad was taking all these college classes. He got a biology degree with an earth science minor from what used to be called the Central Missouri State University. It's now UCM, for those of you that know. And anyway, so when I was growing up, I got to go out with him when he would go fossil hunting or looking for Indian artifacts, arrowheads, and clay pots and things. He'd take me out fishing all the time, doing all kinds of little science experiments that he was doing in his class. He would come home and do with me. At the same time, I was one of those kids that was lucky enough to grow up when Bill Nye was on TV with his show on PBS, when Fred Rogers was still around, Scientific American, Frontiers, and Nova. I watched it all, all the time, every week. I grew up pretty heavily influenced by Star Trek, which really kind of took the science and gave me a lot of passion about it, because never in my life did I think I'd live in a time when we basically had, things like iPads, which were pads on Star Trek in the 1992, 1993. So it's kind of cool to see that. So I kind of grew up with a scientifically minded set of ideas because of my dad and my mom. I also grew up as a gamer. I started on computer. Our family got our first computer in 1993, and I think it was running Windows 3.1 maybe. It might have been 94. I can't remember. Whenever that had been there. And so, I was playing Wolfenstein. I was playing Doom. We talked about this before the show. I was playing Rise of the Triad, and I had a Super Nintendo, so I, was into console too, and I was doing all the Donkey Kong, Mario, and all that stuff. And it just kind of, grew. I ended up with a Nintendo 64 a few years later, and then got a PS2, and then a PS3 and a 360, and here I am 22, 23 years later, still gaming, still going outside, enjoying nature, and still doing science.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. So what's currently your degree at where you're studying at?
So ironically, it's not a science degree. I mean, not what I started as. I started as a physics major. I, in my sophomore classes, hit a brick wall with some of the higher level physics, and I just couldn't do it. And I had a big long discussion with my advisor, and I said, I really don't want to leave the school, but I don't think that I can get a degree in physics in a reasonable amount of time. I've already spent 3 years at a community college. I don't want to spend 8 years on a bachelor's degree. And so we made the decision. We talked, and decided to switch me to earth and environmental science because I had that background. And about the time we made that switch earlier this year, I was starting to get really tired of school and starting to kind of burn out on it. So I finally did a degree audit, and I figured I could get a bachelor's of science in general science and graduate next December. And I could take a couple of years off and then make a decision if I wanted to go back and try to get like a master's degree in geology, or if I wanted to try for something else in the sciences. I've recently, over the last couple of years, discovered a lot of things that I'm really good at, like public speaking. So, I have a lot of different options that are available to me when I graduate. I just kind of have to take the time to get them all figured out. So, but yeah, currently I'm just a general science major. I've taken just about every class you can take. So.
I know the burnout feeling. I had to change my major twice. First time I ran into a brick wall with accounting courses, the accounting class, and my brain was not wired that way. So I wound up changing to journalism, and then after the first class related to that, realized that no, that's not what I wanted to do either. And I was like, oh, my dad liked history, and I might like history too. So I changed to that, and it was called the Finish Up and Get the Hell Out plan, as opposed to the 4-year plan.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's really hard, I think, to kind of find your place when you're. I don't know if you're exactly like I am, but I'm interested in just so many different things that I want to do it all, and you can't do it all. And so trying to find that one specific thing that's right for you is really hard to do.
I can agree with that. I had to change my major as well. When I started school, I'm born and raised in Missouri, so I went to Sedalia at a community college, State Fair. Went there for 2 years, about close to my 1.5 year mark, right when I was getting ready to get out of there. I changed from being a history major to computer science. And I transferred here to UCM in Warrensburg, and been sticking with it since. So hopefully I'll be able to graduate this coming May, as long as they don't screw anything up.
Yeah, that's always the big deal, is whether or not something gets screwed up or not. No, I went to Longview Community College in Lee Summit, so I did the community college thing. Initially, I had this grandiose dream at 17, 18 years old that I was going to learn to speak Japanese, and I was going to get a degree in Asian history, and I was going to move to Japan, and obviously I'd get married to an Asian woman, and I'd have this great life being a translator and writing a few books and traveling around Asia. And then I kind of, learned that that's not as easy as it sounded. I also took a few classes in geology, and I had this amazing professor that became a kind of a mentor to me, and he just kind of slowly kept swaying me. He's like, you really ought to check out and maybe think about being in the science in some way. And once that started, that's what happened. So I've been associated with it ever since, and that was about 2007 when that started for me.
So what? And your favorite science to date is?
That's a really hard question to ask. All of it, obviously, but no, I came to physics because of astronomy. I've always had a very deep connection to being outside. And so I'd have to say that astronomy and geology together, to me, are like two sides of the same coin, and they are the two parts of science that I find the most fulfillment in and the most interest in, and that would be have to be my answer for my favorite would be those two.
Because I remember you used to tell stories about going outside looking at the stars and wanting to be able to teach someday and taking students out and
Yeah.
pointing to the sky and everything and showing the wonders of that. Are you eventually wanting to teach or not so much now?
Well, I can tell you for the last 4 years that I've been at New Mexico Tech, I do teach. I've taught 2 undergraduate laboratories. I am a student researcher. I have published scientific papers in the Minor Planet Bulletin on asteroid light curves, and we can talk about that maybe a little later if you're interested in hearing more about that. But I do, one of my responsibilities at the campus observatory is to do these public outreach events once a month or twice a month. We have big groups of people will come in, and we'll basically give them a tour of modern science and astronomy and the night sky, and we'll take them out. We have these big, nice telescopes, and so I do teach, and the more I've done it, the more I've learned that it is an incredible feeling. It is also incredibly exhausting. And I don't necessarily think that I want to really teach anymore. In science, I'm much more interested in the research part of it, and that was something I discovered when I came here, where I was able to actually discover things on my own, left in a corner, nobody bothering me. That was much more pleasurable to me than actually doing the outreach, which I find to be very pleasurable but tiring.
So you're gonna be the big researcher and discover the way to the next galaxy?
I don't think I'm gonna make that. I had a lot of trouble with quantum mechanics, and I was the only person to get a C in a class that basically the only 2 grade options were A or F. So that kind of tells you that it was a really difficult struggle for me, and I just at the end I had to make that switch. And I've spent the majority of my actual research on asteroids, on comets, doing a little bit of kind of the engineering side of putting together telescopes and looking at optics and maintenance and cleaning of instrumentation, camera instrumentation. So, but really, once I switched my degree this spring, I kind of left that behind. I mean, I still have the skills, but I tend to do a lot more with sedimentary geology now, since I've kind of shifted that focus, and I look a lot more at hydrology and things that they're still hard sciences, but they're not quite as mathematically demanding as pure physics was.
Which computer sciences, how heavily is math involved in the courses that you've taken, Shaggy?
Well, in UCM there are 3. There used to be 3 areas when I came there in about 2012, but they added another area just this last year for game design, which kind of annoys me because I think I probably would have chosen that path instead of applied computer science. But in my area, which is applied computer science, I only had to take an applied calculus class. In the past, I did have to take another physics class at this school because some of my stuff didn't transfer. But I took a physics class in high school, and I took college algebra in high school. I never had a problem with math. Math has usually been pretty easy for me. In computer science, 90% of the math that you're doing is usually binary-based. Binary-based addition, ANDing, or subtract, stuff like that. Boolean operations. So it's difficult, but it's not. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, I can tell you that our department for CS here is quite a bit different, I think, than most of the others. I have quite a number of friends that have done computer science all over the country, Ours requires Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3, linear algebra, ordinary differential equations, partial differential equations, and analytical geometry as part of the degree. And it's a really extremely tough course load. There's a class that I don't know if you have to take a class like this, but it's called compilers. And it's typically the last class a computer scientist at New Mexico Tech will take, and they usually take it with no other classes their last semester before they graduate. And usually they end up getting like a C or a B in the class because it's so difficult and so demanding on time. But I think that it's like that here because 95% of our CS graduates go off to work at Sandia or Los Alamos or White Sands, so they go off to a government security job. And computer security is a huge focus of our department here. We don't have game design. We have a lot of pure logic in math that kind of mixes into computer science, but the vast majority is security. And cybersecurity, that sort of thing. So that may be why there's so many more classes. They actually take more math in our CS major than a physics major does, which is kind of crazy.
I know for our if you the 4 areas are applied computer science, actual pure computer science, and then emphasis in networking were the original 3, and then they added the game design degree. For the pure computer science degree, that you have to take Calc 1 and Calc 2. I don't think you have to take any crazy geometry or anything like that. However, a class that I'm taking this semester that deals with computer graphics, it deals with matrix multiplication and transformations, rotations, all kinds of crazy stuff that every single one of those functions that you perform on an object, like say you had a cube and you're rendering a cube, like if you play Minecraft.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like say you're going to rotate one of those cubes or something, that's a matrix multiplication that's going on in the background, and all that gets passed to the graphics card. The graphics card's super fast, so it doesn't have to worry about it. But so that kind of math, that's pretty high level, and you have to look at it from an abstract point of view. And
right.
In computer science, 90% of the time, you really aren't going to be doing any of the math actually, because all that stuff is taken care of for you. You're looking at like abstraction, all kinds of other stuff.
Right.
You mentioned something about a compilers class, and a class that I took last semester. The instructor that taught the original compilers class, that I can't remember if it was graduate level or undergraduate level, but they got rid of it, and I don't know if it really upset him or not, but what he ended up doing, instead of having a separate class for compilers and then the class I was taking, which was called Programming Languages, which is a generic class about, like, if you take this class, you'll be able to learn almost any programming language because it's the design and logic and stuff that goes behind making a programming language. But he also talked about, like, compilers and how they work, how they parse, like, your source file, all that other crazy stuff. Right. So it's pretty much that class and a compilers class all thrown into one. I really almost wanted to shoot myself, but I passed it with a C.
That sounds crazy. That sounds crazy.
It was one of the roughest classes I've had so far, and then this semester I've got one that's pretty rough too, and it's computer architecture. So like top-level abstraction for like design of a processor. I actually have to design a basic processor in this class.
Right.
I want to shoot myself again.
That does not sound like fun to me. I like playing on computers. I don't really know a whole lot about them or how they work. So,
if it's any consolation, I can swap parts in and out. My greatest weakness is completely building one from the ground up. Motherboard, power supply, and all that. I do better if it's already somewhat put together and it just needs stuff added to it. Because that I've never been able to fully build one myself. One day I will overcome that fear and do that. Because my fear is I'll make the same mistake I made several years ago with an adder. Oh, this fan and heat sink's no longer on there. I'm sure it'll be fine without it, and wonder why the system mysteriously shuts off in the middle of me doing
Yeah.
a 3D game. So I'm like, oh, this is running very, very well. All of a sudden, pew, the chip had fried.
Right. Yeah, no, it's as far as computers go, I had to take CS113 when I got here. It was introductory to computer science, a requirement of the school, and the teacher basically walked into the class. We all sat down. We had these big, nice computers. He said, "Log on the computer." I log on the computer, and he says, "This is called Linux. Moving on. We're going to start programming." Yeah, it was like, here's Linux, and now I'm using it, and I'm like, well, I'd never used Linux before. I work primarily in Macintosh OS, which is similar, that I know now. But yeah, there was no instructions. Just we're on Linux and we're going. And it was a long semester of trying to figure that out.
That was similar to when I walked into my CS 1100 class. That all the computers were actually set up to dual boot operating systems. Mine is too. But the instructor made us. He didn't prefer which one you wanted, but for us to submit an app, or like if we wrote a program, which it was our introductory class, similar to what yours was probably.
Right.
And for us to submit a program to him, you don't email it to him. You had to submit it through the Linux server that we had on campus in that building. And in order to do that, it had a basic shell script that was written for Linux only, because it's completely different. And you'd have to submit it remotely by doing that.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I've been messing around with Linux for since probably 2011. I love Linux. And I would be on it today, except I was just doing homework in Windows, and I was just playing Borderlands a little bit ago.
Yeah.
But so I had no problems jumping into it, but I know probably 80% of the students that were sitting in that class were lost. They were like, I don't know how to do this. And so he ended up giving us a sheet that's just like, do this, this, and this, and this in this order, and you'll get the correct thing accomplished.
Yeah.
So which distribution were you sitting in front of, Curtis?
Which Linux? I think we were using Red Hat, I think is what it was, but I don't quite remember the class. I got an A in the class. I did all the work. It was hell, and then it's kind of like chemistry. I don't like chemistry that much. I guess if there was one science I don't like that much, it's chemistry, because how many times can you have solution A, solution B, and tell me about solution C? It's like, really? But I didn't really remember a whole lot, because the programs that we used in our research were these really nice high-end programs that pretty much did everything for you through Windows or Mac, depending what you were running, or they even work on Linux, but they did all our Fourier transformations and our calculations for us. And so a lot of the stuff I learned I just really never used. And I kind of not sure how I feel about that, because I can definitely see how there's a benefit to learning at least having some familiarity with programming and how a system works and which OS you're using, what it is, how it works. But at the same point in time, it still seems like it's almost a little variable depending on what field of science you're in, what you're going to do. In our physics department, for example, everything is done through Linux. Every computational physics and computational astrophysics, Dr. Sonnenfeld teaches them as if you know your way around Linux. The software is for Linux, everything's for Linux. But if you kind of migrate over into the Earth Science department on campus, everything's done through Mac. Everything. It's all the time. It's like I'm lucky because I'm sitting in class and I have a little MacBook Air, and so every time I have to get a program to do some calculations or something, it's like, oh, it's only on Mac, and I'm like, woohoo! But half the class is like, oh man, I can't deal with it. But then again, if you go over to our computer science department, they're using all three systems and they're going nuts with them, doing all kinds of really interesting things.
I would have a heyday, because
yeah.
I would just love to have like one Mac sitting here, my Linux desktop sitting here, and then a Windows sitting over here.
You know how
I wanted to show you this real quick, Curtis. I picked this up a while back.
Nice.
version of Red Hat 5.2. I don't know if I can even run it. I've tried a couple times and I've never gotten it to work correctly, but
Yeah.
it's from '98.
Wow. No, we have the main Linux that they use, I believe, is still Fedora. But yeah, we were using Red Hat then. I was going to say, some of the computer science students, we have a department that has a couple of Asian transfer students, and one of them is from South Korea, and she, I don't know how, but got her hands on a copy of Red Star OS, which is the North Korean operating system. And so I was lucky enough about 2 years ago to see the only system in the world that crashes more than Windows, because it was like every 5 minutes they just try to click on like a start icon, which was a horribly ripped off Windows start icon for this really shitty OS, and the whole thing would crash, and I had to reboot the computer and go again. Just trying to get a simple image, a JPEG or like a bitmap image to come up for them, it crash over and over and over again. It was awful. So, it's kind of funny to be able to say, hey, I've seen in operation an operating system that nobody else in the world uses, which is pretty cool, but, kind of neat. I don't know how she got it. I'm assuming they must have had family or something from North Korea and that stuff, but it's pretty funny.
So what got you down to the place that you're studying at in the first place? Because I don't think I've ever heard the full story about that.
In 2010, in the spring, I was getting close to transferring out of Longview. I had taken a lot of math classes, elementary stuff, like I'd really gotten a solid grasp on algebra and really corrected a lot of things that didn't work well for me in high school. And so I was getting close to getting out of school, and I was applying to all these big astro schools like Cornell and Harvard and UC Davis and Washington University in St. Louis, University of Washington in Seattle. And I kept going to my mentor, getting all these recommendation letters because it's like I want to get into a good school. And he said to me, you should check out. There's a school in central New Mexico. You should really check them out and apply there at least. And so I applied to all the schools. New Mexico Tech was the first one that emailed me back and said, yeah, you meet the requirements to come to school here. So I set up a trip. I came down in June of that year to see the school, and I had actually already accepted their offer to come to school here, all the financial aid packages and scholarships they'd given me. But I had an option to give a final, so I could come down and I could see the school and say, well, maybe this isn't the right place, so I'm going to decline for the following year. But when I got down here, it was like a mind explosion. I had never been any farther west in the United States than Manhattan, Kansas. I had been to the East Coast, I'd been to Chicago, I'd been overseas to the United Kingdom twice, but I have never been farther west before I came out here than Manhattan, Kansas. And so, whereas I'm driving through West Texas and driving through eastern New Mexico, western New Mexico, central New Mexico, it's like this, there are all these big-ass mountains, it's like this is a place for me. When I saw the school, I knew this was the right place for me when I saw all the computer science kids huddled around a table outside on a summer day, all playing like Quake or whatever it was they were playing in the corner. I know it's a school for me when I'm walking down the street and I see two little girls from school walking down the street trading Pokemon cards with each other. I know this is the right place when I see two old-ass geologists sitting in the corner arguing with each other about how old that rock is, on the street, almost about to beat each other's brains out over how old that rock is. And I'm like, this is the place I need to go. I was also really impressed. This is not an easy school to stay in. We have only a 70% retention rate. In fact, it's October 28th. Already 4 people in my apartment complex are gone. They've dropped out of school because they couldn't even cut it, and they were incoming freshmen that just got here in August. And the fact that they push us so hard in so many different ways really made me stop and think that kind of skill that they're trying to build would make me a very desirable person to hire if I go out into a work field versus if I stayed in academia. Um, and so that's kind of how I ended up here. It was just kind of by, one teacher saying, hey, you're applying to all these big name schools that are going to cost you hundreds of thousands to go to, where you could get the same education for 9 times less if you check out a couple of these smaller tech schools. And I'm really glad that I did do that and listen to him.
And we some other people who were co-hosts of the show, we actually talked about how four-year universities have been used as glorified trade schools when they weren't designed for that in the first place, with the exceptions of specialized fields, specifically in medical fields, computer science fields, those sorts of things, and then everything else was supposed to be primarily for academia, research, what have you. And now all of a sudden, they start using them to replace trade schools, and then people graduate and suddenly discover that nobody, even if there was an opening, they're not going to get hired because they're overqualified, or they don't have the work experience to back that piece of paper up with.
Right. No, I mean, New Mexico Tech is a full 4-year research university, and that is strange. When you first get here as a student, you start realizing, especially I came from a community college, it's like, we're the history major. We don't have them. We don't offer history degrees. We're the art, we don't have them. Everyone is in some branch of engineering, computer science, chemistry, physics, what have you. And, there's a lot about, I think, according to a 2013 study, New Mexico Tech has an 80% of the students that graduate do find employment in under 6 months. And out of those 80%, about 50% of those start employment at 6 figures, which is, highly impressive, especially in the fields of mechanical and electrical engineering and in general physics and some of the other more profession-based programs. So, thinking, as I was at the time, thinking I wanted to make the money because I was going to have to pay off all this debt that I would accumulate just going to school. I felt like it was better. It's also a smaller school, and it's really nice to be able to sit in a class of only 25 to 30 students instead of 600 and have that kind of personal connection. I've connected with so many teachers here that it's really incredible. And on top of that, in science, I've connected with so many people that are the equivalent of Kim Kardashian, but of science, and not that stupid. So, but that superstar. Penny Boston is the current chair of the Department of Earth and Space Sciences here, and she is world famous. She worked with Carl Sagan in the 80s. She knew his first wife. She worked under the guy who came up with Gaia hypothesis, which is this a very big hypothesis about how the world is connected, how all the different life forms are connected. You've probably seen shows on Discovery where they talk about if all the insects were to disappear from the Earth, it would descend into chaos. That's kind of what Gaia tries to map and talk about. She's the director of the National Cave and Karst Research Institute. She works for NASA. She has all these epic setups for all these space probes that she works on with her students. She's this crazy old lady too. She doesn't take crap from anybody. It has the most awesome. I think she has a copy in her office of every single original Star Wars action figure still in the box, lined up around the room in her office. So she's got this amazing office that just screams, nerd, or it's just great. It's really great. I've worked with my advisor in physics was Dr. David Westfall, who is a 25-year veteran of radio astronomy and studied under a Nobel Prize winner at Yale. I've worked with a lot of really cool people that had 30 or 40-year careers at NASA before they retired and became teachers. And so having that experience really helped to kind of pump me up and get me really excited to be here. You might not get that at a 4-year school, like a state school or something like that.
Or a school that has a prestigious name, but
Right.
sort of like going into the grocery store, you're buying the brand name,
Right.
but you may actually be getting something exactly the same or even better for less.
You can. There are some instances where I have one of my best friends here got his math degree. He's a mathematician, and he graduated in June. And he and his wife are now living in Oxford in the United Kingdom. He's going to Oxford, and it's going to be cool because in 5 or 6 more years I'm going to be able to say I knew him when, because he's working on artificial tissue growth and mathematical biology, and working on these ways of growing new kinds of organs from small biomaterials, so that you could take some material from Tommy, and let's say you were having your lung was damaged. He wants to try to be able to take some of your own lung tissue and grow you a new one, so that there's no chance of rejection. You just put the new lung in, and away you go. You don't have to worry about rejection. You don't have to take all these drugs for the rest of your life to keep the organ working properly. It's going to do that because it came from you. And that's really incredible. And he might not have the opportunity to do that. I definitely wouldn't have the opportunity to work on that here. But, like I said, not always are those big name schools going to be there, but they do have their purposes, especially when you get into post-professionalism. But yeah, when it comes to going to a smaller school like this, I think it's a better thing because all of our stuff is hands-on. I take labs for just about every class I'm in, so I'm always getting an applied feel to the science I'm doing.
All right. So you still play video games? You've made your return to Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
The most complicated card game that I played, that I really got into for a while, was Yu-Gi-Oh! But I did dabbled in Magic for a bit, and then I lost interest. So now you're addicted to the crack known as Magic the Gathering again.
Yeah, once again, yes. Now, I started playing Magic when I was about 6 years old. And I played all through elementary, middle, and high school, and then I stopped in 2005, just because, not for any particular reason, it just sort of happened. I had met actually you guys at the CMSU Anime Club, and I was going to college myself, and I was exploring all these other new options, and the old group of friends that I had played the game with for so long were not my group of friends anymore, and I didn't know anyone who played. And so I just kind of put my stuff aside for 5, 6, 7 years, and it wasn't until I came down here and I was having trouble finding a group to get in with outside of just the academic friends that I have, that I was like, well, you know what, there's a group that plays on campus, I'm just going to pick this up again. And sure enough, that helped me to really kind of branch out and become a lot more successful in having more connections at this school other than just academic friends versus, because I have friends that they are really cool people, but all they're interested in is hiking and rock climbing. Well, I'm interested in that, so I can do those things with them, but I can't play Magic or I can't play, Borderlands or something with them because they're not into that. And I have friends that are likewise interested in gaming, but they don't want anything to do with going outside and hiking or river rafting. And so I can do stuff with that. So it was kind of cool to have that whole big mixture of different groups of friends, and then to find my old gaming crew, and pull them in and have another connection to have. So it keeps me varied.
Do you still do console gaming?
Yeah, a little bit here and there. I still have my trusty old PS3. I've been hesitant to upgrade because, being a college student costs a lot of money. And the PS3 I've had, so there's a nice backlog of games I can do on that. But I can tell you, I used to be a big supporter of Nintendo, and I think by virtue of just how I've grown over the last 10 years or so since leaving high school, I've just kind of drifted away from them, and I've kind of stayed to more modern games. And actually, a friend of mine and I here were having this discussion the other day because we were talking about, as I've mentioned on the show already, we were talking about Doom. We were talking about Duke Nukem 3D. A lot of those old games, Myst, if you're familiar with the game Myst, had incredible level design. You're dropped into a game world, and you're basically, figure it out on your own. And we were talking about how modern games today seem to hold your hand to the game. They'll tell you where to go, where the item you need is, and it really kind of feels like a lot of that originality has come out of the game in favor of just having bigger graphics, more powerful systems. It's not to say that there aren't good games today. There are very good games today, I think. It's just that I went recently. A friend of mine told me about Brutal Doom, which is a mod that you guys should definitely check out. If you have any gamers in your podcast, you should definitely have them check it out. But if you have Doom, Steam version is fine. You can download a mod called Brutal Doom, and it's just insane. It keeps the flavor of the original, but they actually update the graphics a little bit, make them a lot more well lit, and they actually, it's hard to describe, but there's a video that just shows how brutal it becomes. Very bloody and very different, other than how the game used to function. And we were talking about how that's become this big thing where the mod community is stepping in on games, and they're trying to recapture some of that old, more difficulty in games and bring them back into the modern world where we're faced with such limited gameplay in some places, Call of Duty. So,
Speaking of those games that are going back, have you played Black Mesa?
I haven't had a chance to do it yet. I was going to download it this summer, and then I had a horrible accident with my laptop, and I didn't have it for like 3 months because it was in the shop. And so with school, I haven't really done a lot. But over Christmas, I plan to pull down Black Mesa and try that out, because that's the kind of stuff that I'm really interested in. Rise of the Triad is a game that almost no one knows about. One of those old 90s Doom-like, Quake-like shooters. And last year, the company that created, I forget their name, but they actually made a whole brand new game called Rise of the Triad. It's just a modern version of that old game. And so I've had the opportunity to go back and play some of these, and we had Wolfenstein: The New Order, which very much kept the feel of the original game, but brought in all the modern graphics and everything to it.
That game was absolutely excellent. I just beat that just the other day.
I loved it.
One of my favorite elements of it is like about midway to a little bit past midway through the game. Once you get into that main base, I can't remember what it's called, but you have the option to sleep.
Yeah, and you go through the dream sequence.
Yes, you go through the dream sequence, and when you do that, you have to hold down the E key, your interaction key. Right. I'm playing it on PC, of course, but you have to hold the key, and it says Nightmare. And then once you get in, it goes to a black screen, and then BJ says, it's not over until I'm dead.
Yeah.
Something about it's not over until I'm dead. The fighting keeps continuing. Bloody, like something else, I can't remember. And then it drops you into that original world where all the weapons and everything are still 3D, but like and everything else is 3D as well, but it's like Return to Castle Wolfenstein.
Yeah, it drops you back into Wolfenstein 3D maps. It was just incredible. I was really, they're doing, the same company is doing the reboot of Doom, which I'm so fond of, so I'm hoping that it has a similar throwback and has that same style, because it's not to say that New Order didn't have its problems, because it did, but I think that was to be expected, given that it was obviously a game they made with consoles in mind and then ported to PC as a 64-bit game, causing problems for users who had 32-bit operating systems. Not like me, but others who did.
Another big problem with it was, especially with my computer, my graphics card only has 1 gigabyte of video memory. And they implemented a technology in ID Tech 5 game engine called, what was it? Basically like large texture mapping. I forgot what it is they called it exactly.
Yeah.
But instead of mapping like specific textures to specific objects and doing it in small detail, they grab like this whole chunk of world and then map the entire thing all at once.
Right.
It takes up a crap ton more memory.
Exactly.
So I had to go in and change my settings and stuff, because I bumped my settings up pretty high, and then I was going through a sequence where you have to go shoot down this helicopter, And I walked up almost to where this object is, and then everything goes black. Like all the stuff is black, like a person, and then part of the floor up to here, and then this object. I'm like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
So I started looking it up, and it turns out it's a texture issue. It's texture size because your RAM's full.
So if I may ask you guys, what are there any games that you're particularly excited for that are coming out soon?
The Order 1886.
That does look pretty awesome.
I'm also getting a PS4, and since it's PS4 exclusive,
right.
Mine is on layaway right now, but I should have it roughly around next month.
The most advanced gaming hardware that I have at this point is this Galaxy Note 3. So, I have not done much in the way of console gaming in a long time, though.
Yeah.
Though I do own a classic Sega Genesis now, but
nice.
Yeah, saw it at a pawn shop for a really cheap price, and I was like, why not? It still works. I also own an arcade machine, one of the sit-down ones. So the machine that I have has 2 gigabytes of RAM. It has an NVIDIA GeForce 210. And it has a gig of RAM on it, but the system only has 2 gigs of RAM, so running Steam on this system is out of the question.
Right.
They recommend 4 gigabytes of RAM because of some of the games that are on there, regardless of what platform I run. So I will have to look into getting a much faster desktop at some point, one that can hold more memory.
Right.
And then we can start talking about, okay, what games am I going to put on this thing? Because, in all honesty, last time we had to record in 2 sections because all of a sudden hard drive starts thrashing right in the middle of it, and bam! That was frustrating. Luckily, it's behaving itself this time, and I suspect it was a memory issue. It was going to my swap partition a little too often. I'm like, oh. So, bumping the system up to 4 gigs, which is as much as it can hold, actually, will probably alleviate some of that. I no longer own that system that had 8 gigs of RAM. I sold that to somebody else, moving down here.
Yeah. My system currently runs 16 because that was the free upgrade when I bought it. I don't even think I use all of it, but I have it. So
that's what I thought when I built this computer a couple years ago. I thought I'd never use all. I only have 8 gigs, but I thought I'd never use all 8 gigs, and that's incorrect because if I'm playing Minecraft, I play Minecraft with heavy amounts of mods. I play mod packs.
Right.
There's one on the AT launcher that just came out, or not just came out, but the one that's was redone. The one before it is the Yogscast Complete. They have a YouTube show and everything where they do all kinds of stupid stuff. And for that one to even run on my computer with the texture pack that I have to give Java at least 3 gigs of memory.
Wow.
And on top of that, in the background, I've already got like 3 to 4 gigs used.
Right.
So it gets up to the point, if I don't have... Google Chrome now runs in the background automatically. You can't stop that. Unless you change the option or exit out of it. And I usually just leave it running. But if I go in and play that game, I have to close out Google Chrome, otherwise I'm running out of memory. And my system will lag and then go, and then lag and then go, and then lag and then go. It's killing stuff out of memory to keep going.
Right.
So I'm going to have to upgrade.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, you said yours has 16. That's just your desktop, or?
No, it's a laptop. It's a laptop.
Oh, wow. So is that your MacBook Air, or is that?
No, this is a Toshiba. I can't even pronounce the damn thing. Cosmio. Yeah.
My old roommate had a Cosmio, an old school Cosmio with the. It was the first generation Core i series, Core i7.
Yeah, I have the second generation i7. This one's relatively still pretty new. And I love it. It's been a great computer to me. I had some problems last year that resulted from an idiot friend dropping it. And it cracked the motherboard. I have to have the motherboard replaced, but fortunately it was under warranty for them to do that, so it didn't cost me anything.
Wasn't anybody I knew of, was it?
No. It was someone down here who was
Okay.
jacking around and not doing what they were supposed to be doing. But yeah, no, I was I've really enjoyed the computer. I'm really worried because the game I'm anticipating right now is Far Cry 4. And it's like, I don't know if I can run it because it looks pretty intensive. I'm not sure.
Why would you be worried?
It depends on his video card.
Well, my video card, it's a 4 gigabyte video card. It's an NVIDIA something or other. I don't know. It was the biggest upgrade option they had at the time.
Is it a 600 or 700?
I think it might be a 700. I'm trying to find it here on my computer so I could tell you.
Go to your start menu and then type DXDiag. You should be able to bring it up, and then you click on the display tab. That's usually the quickest way.
Okay.
That might bring up your Intel HD graphics if you have that, which you probably...
Type what again?
DXDiag.exe.
Right, okay. Gotcha. Yes, where is it? Okay, that's DirectX Display. How about, let's just look there and see if I could tell you which one it is. Yeah, that brought up my Intel. Why did it not bring up?
Then you'll have to go to your device manager.
Yeah. You do that.
Oh, you have one of the hybrids, don't you? One where there's the battery saving mode and then the...
Right.
90% of hardware, if you have a laptop, or I mean laptops, I should say, and 90% of laptops nowadays, if they have a dedicated graphics card, like in his case, it's going to have integrated graphics as well, because both AMD and Intel have been designing the processors with integrated graphics built in on the chip.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a GeForce GTX 670M.
Oh, okay, that was pretty good. You should be able to run it.
Yeah, I don't have any. I just don't know how much they've improved over the last time they released a game. But I've been a sucker for those ever since the second one came out, and they're a lot fresher in terms of shooters to me than playing this year's COD rehash. Which, full disclosure, I still play them anyway. But
it's kind of fun to play with friends. But I mean, other than that, I don't see any value in Call of Duty.
No, I definitely can understand. The funny thing is I don't play multiplayer. I only play the single player. So I usually wait until the game is dropped down to $19.99 or $10.99 or whatever I can get it for, and I grab it up then and I play through whatever crappy story they've written for 6 hours and then move on. But I generally tend to like. Video gaming is a storytelling medium that's as powerful as film is, I think. And that's what I'm usually interested in, is having an interactive experience with a story.
So, since you said that, I have to ask you, do you like Mass Effect? Do you like the Mass Effect series?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Have you played all of the series?
I have played the first two. I have stayed away from the third one.
Don't I get it on Origin, do you?
No, I don't want to get it on Origin, and I've also heard that the ending is kind of like a big slap in the face.
It is. I don't want to. I won't tell you what it is because the game itself, like even though the ending like really sucks, I'm not going to say that the ending gives any sort of buffer or anything for all the choices that you've made in the game. I'm going to tell you straight up.
Right.
Choices practically didn't matter. Maybe this was just a problem with the writer's point of view on how to end the story, but the game up until that point, like all of the games all together, the entire storyline is still extremely good. and I still have a lot of respect for BioWare and the company for putting out those games. But yeah, the end of the third one sucks.
Yeah, I've heard the stories, and I was a huge fan growing up in high school. I spent many a night staying up with friends playing Diablo 2, and then 10 years later we got Diablo 3, which kind of I'm not sure if you're familiar with all the controversy surrounding that or not, but that was kind of a big slap in the face to a lot of gamers that liked it. So
yeah, I get it completely. I do have Diablo 3 and I played it. I never played Diablo 2 only because it was out when I was I was barely even in middle school, so
yeah,
I didn't have a. At the time, I had a computer that had a Pentium MMX processor.
yeah,
it could run the original Age of Empires and Roller Coaster Tycoon. That made me happy. And a couple of city building games that are archaic nowadays, but I'd still probably love to play the crap out of them.
Right.
But I totally understand, because going from Diablo 2 to Diablo 3, they got rid of so many different options and so many different things that you could do, so many different characters and classes and stuff. And in the new game, you only have, now with the new expansion, which was $40,
yeah,
gives you one extra
class. Yeah.
And the Crusader's absolutely awesome in the new game, but why would you pay $40 just for one
character, one new ad?
I was about to ask which controversy you were referring to. I guess that was one of them. There was also a controversy to where if people were playing Diablo 3 through Wine on Linux-based systems, all of a sudden the ban hammer went down on them for whatever reason as well.
Right, I remember that was
Blizzard,
the issue.
And I think Blizzard claimed that that's not why, or no, we don't ban people using Wine, except people came up and said, I use Wine on my system and I still got banned. I'm not cheating, I'm just trying to play the game.
Right.
So...
Yeah, no, I mean, the game has definitely been ripe with controversy because, first of all, let's face it, it wasn't finished when they released it. It was nowhere near finished when they released it. They just released patch 2.0, which was supposed to be the massive update, and it's still not finished in my opinion, and I just stopped giving money to Blizzard at that point. Which is too late, really, anyway, because they got me for the expansion in the original game, so I might as well just accept that. But, no, once they kind of joined forces with I don't know, it's even that question, which is the bigger Satan, EA or Activision, in this case, but once they joined forces with one of the two, the quality just went down and the profits went up, and that's what they wanted. And that really, when that happened, is why I started going on Steam and looking for a lot of older stuff that maybe I hadn't played in a while or had just missed. If I go on and I look at my wish list right now, you can see I've got a lot of stuff on here, like the original Half-Life. I'm a huge fan of Half-Life 2 and Episode 2 and 1 and 2, and I hope someday they'll make a third one. I never actually played the original Half-Life before, so I've got that on here. Lots of stuff like that.
So, speaking of video games, the episodes that just went live on the podcast feed yesterday, it came from somebody who has been in video game media for over a decade, as eccentric as he can be. I asked him his opinion on the whole controversy with quote-unquote Gamergate, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I don't really know that much about it, to be honest. I understand that it was, at one time, it was a movement to try to bring about some better reporting in the gaming community, and that at some point it either morphed into or it got hijacked, I'm not quite really sure what happened, into a platform for internet sad people to do whatever it is that they're going to do to make other people's lives miserable. And that basically ended with some girls in gaming getting like their private information spilled and having people come after them verbally and stalk them through the internet and things because they dared to have a differing opinion about this. I think I don't really follow a lot of video game journalism. For example, I'm a huge, huge fan of Fallout. Fallout 3 was amazing. New Vegas was even better for me. And so for the last couple of years, it's like, when are we getting 4? And if you are like me, you go Google every couple of weeks, see, is there any Fallout 4 news? And you will find
that. I've been doing that for the last
you will find
year.
thousands
Hiding like I'm literally trying to tear my computer down just to get a new Fallout game.
Yeah.
I want it so bad.
And you'll find thousands of clickbait bullshit articles.
Oh yeah.
Excuse me, I probably should censor myself.
Actually, you're fine.
Okay. But they're just garbage articles that are it's like, oh, I heard that Fallout's coming out, and it really infuriates me because to me that's really horrible gaming journalism to run your website as a click farm like that. And you'll find hundreds of them specifically for Fallout 4. A Bethesda representative a year and a half ago or so just happened to be on the MIT campus, and these journalists went nuts saying that's where the game's going to be, is in Massachusetts. Well, there never has really been any reason to think that, other than one of their people was at MIT, which has a computer science department and a game development department. So there are thousands of reasons why that person could have been there outside of scouting locations for a game. And so I've kind of tended to stay away from video game journalism. I actually 3 or 4 years ago got basically comment abused off of Kotaku because those people, apparently, if you disagree with them, they're the devil and they will come after you. And so I just was like, it's not worth it. I'm not going to be on this website anymore.
And speaking of which, there was you talked about certain information getting leaked online and everything else. To catch you back up on everything that happened, first an article regarding Zoe Quinn, basically explaining what it felt like to be the world's person on the internet for a few weeks, got published on Cracked, and I'm one of those people that anytime they read anything related to quote-unquote gender bias issues, anymore, it's a red flag for me, because often enough it involves somebody who's not really an activist in that area, they just like to scream behind a keyboard,
right?
And B, it's clickbait. And sure enough, I asked Stephen Kelly about it, and for about the umpteenth time, I heard the phrase "social justice warrior."
Yeah.
Which you've obviously heard of that too.
Yeah.
And from there we discussed the controversy in a separate episode. Phil Wesley of DMG Ice basically supports the idea of having more accountability in gaming media, though he doesn't like the use of the hashtag Gamergate because other people have attached it to their own personal pet issue, as he states, and it makes everything incoherent as all let out. Shaggy, what are your thoughts on the whole? Well, you kind of sort of delivered some of your thoughts on the whole clickbait thing too.
Yeah, I don't remember if I had mentioned this on the podcast that you and I did after you guys did the podcast on Gamersgate, but personally, I think the entire situation was basically stupid. It started out with someone just blatantly trying to attack someone else, and it ended up with somebody else trying to attack somebody else, and now it's just a giant group of people. Ended up being 2 giant groups of people attacking each other, just a giant mudsling.
Right.
It's pointless, because I understand that some people were getting upset because of something got published or something along that line. But for the most part, I do agree with what you were saying earlier, Thomas, about who I can't remember who it was. Phil Wesley, correct?
Right.
About him saying that video game journalism needs to be held to basically a little bit higher standard and not just clickbait bullshit.
Right. And that's been part of the problem. Steve Kelly, he talked about one of the things that he ran into when he wrote for a website when money started rolling in. All of a sudden, advertisers from big name publishers took out ad space and what have you, and nobody was allowed to talk about that game really at all until the ad was gone.
Right.
And that's sort of the big part of the problem. And eventually, no longer he was asked to bump up the score for a review he did. He said no, and it just quit being fun for him. So he just stopped doing it, and that sort of thing. And his whole summary was some unethical behavior occurred. They got caught, and they teamed up with other SJWs to try to basically take down video gaming as a result of it, and everybody else is getting dragged right into the middle of it. That wants nothing to do with politics or anything like that. They just want to be left alone with their favorite hobby.
Right. Yeah, no, it's really I think it's kind of a sad day for the gaming community, because I think gamers that congregate online and discuss gaming and get into this stuff as much, I really think they're the minority. I hardly ever go on to forums and argue about what the best game is and all that stuff. I play games because I want to relax after a hard day of work, or when I get home from class. I just want to relax for a little bit. And I play all kinds of games. I'm probably the only person that enjoys playing Aliens, Colonial Marines, and that was a huge pile of junk if you look at the opinion of the internet. I loved the game. I mean, it wasn't great, but it's fun, and I enjoy it. And so to me, when I see this stuff kind of go on, I really can't help but think that it's the community itself that makes this issue, because a lot of gamers are the ones who are the journalists writing these stories, whether they're appropriate to write or not, or whether their opinions are correct or what have you. It's I guess we reap what we sow.
And there's a reason I don't refer to myself as a journalist. I discovered, well, from my own perspective, that you have to set certain parts of your own humanity to an extent aside in order to be objective as possible.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I will say that disclosure is a good idea.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
If, for example, you donated to, or if you gave money to a crowdfunding project for a certain game or something like that, and it gets made and you write about it, well, yeah, you absolutely probably should say, hey, I gave money to this.
Right.
Because I go back to a book called Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution, where the company that would eventually become Sierra Online put out some video games. One of them, the Williams family, was friends with people who owned a publication. That publication was still honest about the quality of one of their games and said that this is terrible and everything else. So networking with other people, that's not new. It's I think the lack of disclosure that's a problem, and lack of honesty in certain things is a problem. And then looking for a reason to fight, which after looking at things that SJWs imply or argue about in the first place, makes me want to dump acid down my throat and gouge my eyes out and set them on fire. I'm like,
it's similar, and it's not just video games either. I mean, I play cards. I used to be involved in Warhammer 40K to some degree until I finally had enough of Games Workshop's BS and just dropped it entirely as a hobby. When you start trying to trademark words like space and marine as separate words, your company has a problem. When you are selling products at MSRP that's 3 times higher than the actual value it costs to make them, you know that the company itself already has a problem. This kind of controversy about the integrity in gaming, it spans the whole spectrum. Whether you're a tabletop RPG guy, or a card player, or a video games computer PC or computer or PS3 or Xbox, it doesn't matter. It really spans the whole thing, and I think it has a lot to do with the mental maturity of a number of the people that participate in the hobby. The kids that get on YouTube and you go on a trailer for, I don't know, like a new Final Fantasy game, and somebody has, in the first 3 comments, has brought up Call of Duty, and then you've got a Battlefield kid in there, and then you've got 30 posts of them using racial slurs at each other and talking about how they want to rub their privates all over each other for some reason. You kind of start to question the mentality of some of the gaming community. That I think are these kids that do this are the same people that then show up and they use what knowledge they have of hacking, and they get Zoquin's information and throw it out there on the net. Or there was one just recently, I'm trying to remember, she was from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and all she did was she was asked about the Gamergate, and she said, as a gamer, I work with Will Wheaton on the Geek and Sundry podcast. I've stayed away from making any kind of comment about it, and then 5 minutes later, the Gamergate guy showed up and put all her information out on the public, just for basically saying, I haven't spoken about it because I'm afraid that will happen to me. The fact that she was even willing to answer the question really kind of threw her under the bus for that. And I think that's what I'm saying, is that mentality of those kids that do that has got to be the same as the ones that just sit there on Xbox Live and scream at you over and over and over again for no reason.
And it's this giant train wreck between trolls and social justice warriors.
Yeah.
Trolls and social justice warriors. And certain people going, they're threatening me! And then you suddenly find out the people that are allegedly threatening them to where they're out of their... they have to go out of their homes because they feel so endangered. I'm like, wait, these are the same people who will try to order 40 pizzas the moment a picture of pizzas appear on 4chan. This is the same group of people who were talking about blackfaxing Scientology buildings and pulling all sorts of pranks. These are the same people who tricked Oprah Winfrey into saying the phrase over 9,000 penises on national television.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how can you take them as credible threats?
Well, I think the fear doesn't really come from them, but it comes from the fact that, like, I'll give you an example. One of the things, and I cannot remember her name, but she was in Buffy. That's all I can remember. That you could probably. She had said that the fear was not the kids that released her information, but it's like, I am a Hollywood star. I have a career in acting, and I was a sex symbol in the 90s to a lot of adolescent boys, and I worry that somebody will just find my information who's not even associated with Gamergate or something, and they might come after me because they can now. I think that is a legitimate concern to have. As for whether or not there's going to be some mass group of people from 4chan coming to actually rape you, I think is not the case. But then again, I don't go to websites like 4chan because I don't really like those people anyway.
and it's not for everybody. I tried posting images there, and 5 seconds later, boom, more images, and I don't see mine that I post. I'm like, oh. Dang it.
Well, that's actually, that's a good point. It's not necessarily that place is bad because they've actually done good things. It's that they are just really not for me. I used to spend a lot of time on the internet. I try to spend minimal time on the internet these days because I'm usually out doing something. If I'm on my computer, it's usually for gaming. If I'm not gaming, then I'm not on the computer hardly. And and so just it really wasn't a thing for me to really get into, I guess.
Right.
But
And
yeah.
I think part of it as well is trying to brush everybody under with the same brush stroke too, and
Right.
not.
You can't say everybody on 4chan is the same. You can't say that because one person that goes to that website would hack someone's account and release their photos, that everybody that goes on that site would do that, because that's not the case.
Well, it's also just like saying that, like, for the Gamergate scandal issue bullshit thing, it's like saying that every gamer just sits behind a TV or computer screen, doesn't have anything better to do than slam everybody else and want to hack into somebody's account or
Right, exactly.
somewhere and get their information thrown out there. I don't have that fucking kind of time.
Yeah.
But I would do it for the money.
And
I go to school and I work, and the free time I do have, I prefer to spend it with my fiance and then playing video games. So,
and
I'm a gamer at heart. I don't have that kind of time.
right, and you mentioned Zoquin earlier. The whole, and it wasn't the start of the whole. We need to hold these people accountable.
Right.
Because it really started out as somebody basically kind of posting an expose saying, hey, if you run into this person or wanting to date them, one, they will cheat on you. Two, they're very manipulative. And three, you probably do not want to try to date them at all. Move on to somebody else. Because from looks, I read this whole thing, and I didn't look at the massive graphics of screenshots because it would have taken up my entire screen of my mobile device and then some. But even they're saying that harassment is not necessary, and please quit doing that.
Right.
That it was basically gasoline on the fire that was already there, and Breitbart of all places, which I have mixed feelings on. That's why I went directly to the screenshots, looked at some of the emails from various publications saying, how can we support this person? And I'm like, that doesn't look good. One person rightfully said, I don't think we should be doing this. I am staying out of this.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I've done. I mean, I barely talk about it to people. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't affect me in the slightest.
It's the fucking internet.
Basically.
Don't take it so seriously. And everything else. And also, just because somebody says, I'm advocating on behalf of all of these people, please give me money, I would hesitate to give them money.
Right.
I actually saw a YouTube clip where some professor from England practically, within a few moments, basically owns NSJW because he basically stated, I was prepared to have this debate for free.
I was going to say, I mean, that's a lesson we should have learned, given that a couple of years ago, the rebels fighting against Bashar al-Assad in Syria were all like, just give us some guns so we can take care of the dictator, and now there's ISIS. And it's kind of a lesson you could learn about staying out of things, especially on the internet, when it relates to people's extracurricular activities becoming made public. The best thing you can do, in my opinion, is don't go look at them. Don't go search. Whatever it was they made public for this young lady that was in the gaming industry, I don't even know what it was because I didn't even bother my time with it. I think it was like her address and some pictures or something, but I didn't even bother going to look at that because it's none of my business. I don't care about it. I'm not going to add fuel to the fire by throwing my voice in on an internet forum for something that I don't even really care about in the first place. And I do, I definitely understand, like I was saying earlier, I understand the movement itself about making video game journalism, or journalism just in general, more responsive to being an objective source. but it does definitely feel like it got hijacked at some point and turned into something, or maybe several somethings different. So
Right. And that's because, like, on the one hand, I don't like the idea of somebody being harassed. On the other hand, there are ways of basically faking threats against yourself to garner people feeling sorry for you and everything else. And being through points in my life where I've been manipulated,
right.
I'm kind of leery of things like that. And yesterday, since the recording's taking place today on Tuesday, towards the end of October, you listen to what Phil had to say. He basically is saying the same thing you're saying, is, stop paying attention to him.
Yeah, it's kind of like the more that it gets reported on, the more it's kind of like the Westboro Baptist Church. People don't like them. They certainly have in America the freedom of speech to say what they're going to say, just like I have the freedom to call them ignorant assholes for saying it. But the best thing to do is to ignore them. And my dad and I would always have these conversations. Like, I don't even know why the news goes and records when they go protest somewhere. If they just leave them alone, eventually they would shut up. And I think the same thing is true about Gamergate. If we stop getting into useless fights on the internet, on some forum, or on the comments section of a story or a web page, it will calm down enough to where maybe the original movement about making more integrity in gaming journalism will come back and flourish and actually accomplish something without having all the extra fat around the sides just taking up all the space.
Now that's fair. That's a fair assessment of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I can pretty much agree with that.
So it is about 8:40 p.m.
All right.
We've been going about over an hour, I bet.
Getting close.
Longer one.
But I think this is pretty good. Curtis, what topics would you like to talk about in the future?
Well, I mean, I'm down for talking about space exploration, space travel. I'll do video game shows. I can come in and try to talk about history a little bit. I can talk about politics, but I can be honest, I'm not like the most enthusiastic political person. So, I mean, I can do shows like that too. Just about anything. I really am passionate about education, national park system, and public lands, and that sort of thing, and just general education topics, though. So that any shows you might want to do for that. Your recent show on the Blood Moon was great. Stuff like that I'm always interested in, sitting in and talking on, because you can talk about, all the myths and things and all the great stuff. There's some really fun discussion for that. So
that is some stuff that we haven't done very much of, especially in the last few months or so. So it'd be something I would be interested in doing too. So we could definitely talk about some myths or related to history or even to technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's given a few ideas are starting to spark that would probably have to be appropriately timed, but hey, that sounds very, very fantastic. Curtis, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
He's going to bring a lot to the show with his background in science and exploration outside as well. So I think that just about wraps up this episode. And we are well on our way to getting to episode 70, so we're getting very close. I think it'll be 5 more episodes after this one.
Right.
So, entertain yourself, educate yourself, empower yourself. I'm Thomas.
I'm Shaggy.
And I'm Curtis.
And we will see you next time.